In the last lecture, I set you a little assignment, a little homework, to add something to our temperature converter. And what I wanted you to add was a little label that sits at the top of your screen, or wherever you like, that tells you how many conversions you have completed. So every time you convert successfully, I wanted you to add one to that label. So open up your project and let's have a look at my solution. If you have a different solution that works, that is fine too. So with Xcode Beta open and our main storyboard open, the first step to add this counter is of course to grab a label from our object drawer and drop it in wherever we like. I'm going to drop mine in the top left-hand corner, but you can do it wherever you like. And then I'm going to set a few properties such as my text color. I'm actually going to use perhaps a very slight gray because we don't want this to stand out too much. And I'm going to initialize it with some text of 0 conversions. And this I actually want pinned almost to the top left of my screen. So if I select the label and then I select these nearest neighbor constraints, I can have it at 0 from the left-hand side. Now bear in mind, this is constraining to margins. So I believe there's about a 20 device pixel gap between the edge of the screen and when the view actually starts in terms of margins. The top one, I'll leave it at 8 and let's see what it looks like. So 0 is not showing there. Hang on, 0. And I want this one at 8. And usually you have to press tab and it will add it at the bottom here where it says add number of constraints. And sometimes in Xcode this doesn't appear, which is a bit frustrating. So change your number, press tab, and now it's added 2 constraints. Always make sure it's added those because it's a common error source. Click add to, and then finally let's give this a fixed width because we don't need to worry about it running over. So we can simply say something like 120, hit enter, and let's have the text aligned to the left so it stays on the left. Now I'm just going to update the whole lot. And there we have our little label. Now it's up to you where you put this, top left, bottom right. It doesn't really matter as long as it's obvious to a user what's going on here. Okay, so that's the main part. Now we need to actually connect this label via outlets. So let's open up our assistant editor in the top right. And let me scroll across, click that conversions label, control click it, and drop it in. Preferably, actually I'm just going to remove this to scroll up. We always want to generally put our variables or our outlets to properties or things on screen at the top of our class. Actions we can put anywhere, but properties, just like any other programming correct way to do things, you want to have class level variables and properties right at the top of your file. So people can see at a glance what you've got. I'm going to drop that in there, check it's a UI label, and say conversion num label or whatever you want to call it. And hit connect. So now we have a reference to it, we can change the text to it. Okay, let's save that. Let's switch off our assistant editor and go over to our view controller. Now inside of here, we have our label, excellent. And we need to update that number that we've currently set to 0 by 1 every time we click convert. So we need a class level variable. And I'm going to call this count. Var count is equal to 0. And I could, if I liked, say that this is an integer. Do it that way. But I don't have to because Swift knows that when I put a single number, it will initialize this to an integer type for us. So we have 0 counts when we start up. Then we come down to our convert clicked and we want to add 1 to this count every time we convert. And also we want to change this conversion number label. So recall that inside of here we had a bunch of checks, and then if all those checks checked out, we can actually perform our action in here. So inside of here, underneath where we change the result label, we're going to have count plus equals 1, and that just adds 1 to count. That's shorthand for doing it. You could also say count is equal to count plus 1. That's equivalent to that, but the shorthand way is nice and neat. And once we've done that, we are going to get our, what did we call it? Conversion number label. Conversion number label. And we're going to change the text of it. .text is equal to the string version of count. And then we are going to add on or append a bit of text that says conversions. Because if you recall in our storyboard, we had 0 conversions set on it. So we want to add that bit of text to let the user know exactly what is going on. Now we have a little error here, and that is because I've put this in slightly the wrong place. So I'm going to remove plus conversions, Command X, and I'm going to put it outside of this string declaration. So now it's a string plus another string. Right, so I'm going to run that, and every time we click through, it should tell us we have incremented our count by 1. So here we go, and this sort of counting thing is something you're going to do actually quite often. Let me enter some Celsius 22, convert to Fahrenheit, and it changes to 1 conversion. Click it again, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Now, if I remove all of the numbers and I click convert, it doesn't change. And that, of course, is because it hasn't got through our little maze of checks to start with. So that all works out quite well. I'll just stop that running. And we're starting to get a little bit of code overload, if you like. This kind of thing might happen if you had multiple buttons. You might need to use it. So what we're going to do is cut this and place it in its own function. So Command X, and then somewhere in our class, let's create a function called update count. And let's paste it into there. So this function will be primarily involved with updating that label by 1. So you might actually want to call it update count by 1. Because update count, you could add 5 to it and you wouldn't know what it was doing. This little addition is completely up to you and how you like to program. But whatever you choose to do, always be consistent. Because if someone comes to read your code, and that could be you in a year's time, if you're consistent, you'll spend a bit of time understanding what you did, but as you read on, you'll understand everything that you did much easier rather than being all over the place. Right, now we just need to call that update count by 1 inside of here. And of course, when I run that, that should be all good. We'll be able to update that count. So let's enter our Celsius of 11, convert, and all of that is working great now.